Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special webinar event Actual Tech Media presents in partnership with Rubrik. Today, we're excited to talk to you about how to bring a modern approach and architecture to data management. I'm James Green. I'm going to be your moderator for today's event. I'll be doing a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning, introducing you all to Mike, and facilitating some Q&A at the end. And throughout the event, I will be watching the questions panel, kind of looking for some good questions to talk through at the end there and answering any questions you may have in the meantime. Speaking of questions, we are going to reserve some time at the end for Q&A, so please be sure and get those questions in so we can discuss them, even as you have them, because I don't want you to forget before the end of the webinar. So as you have questions, ask them. I'll file them away. And Mike and I will talk through those as we get closer to the end. As far as resources go, if you look over to the right panel in your console here, you'll see some handouts. Those are provided for you to be able to kind of dig deeper into things you may be interested in, so make sure and check those out. And also, because we're excited to have you here, we are going to be doing a prize drawing today. One lucky attendee is going to receive a $300 Amazon gift card. I'll do that drawing right near the very end. So stick around for that. Make sure that you're here and eligible to win. The prize terms and conditions are accessible via the handouts pane there on the right. So check those out if you have any questions about the prize, but pay attention for that drawing at the end there. Now, because we want to facilitate a really good Q&A at the end and incentivize you to think through some questions that will be helpful not only to you, but to your peers that are on the event, we are also awarding a $50 Amazon gift card to the attendee who asks the best question. So put your questions in. All questions are going to be reviewed, and we'll be able to take as many as we have time for at the end, but also the best one we're going to reach out to and award a $50 Amazon gift card. So use the questions panel to do that. Now, I know you're here to learn more about Rubrik, so without further ado, I want to introduce you to your speaker today, Mike Preston, Technical Marketing Engineer at Rubrik. And I know that he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Perfect. Thanks, James. Yeah, let's just jump into, a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Preston. Work within tech marketing at Rubrik. I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to that, I spent, 15, actually closer to 20 years in the customer space. So I've sat in those customer shoes and went through some crazy challenges. So I like to think that I still have my finger on the pulse, with all the audiences and different things that I'm talking to it all the time. Right at the moment, I'm working as a developer advocate. I went to school to be a developer, then worked in IT operations and then in technical marketing. So I'm kind of coming full circle, with some of the coding and software development that I'm doing. So, it's a super exciting time for me, and hopefully, that customer experience of mine helps shine through. So when I was thinking about this webinar, it was talking about bringing a modern approach or modernizing your IT infrastructure. I thought, what does that really mean to me? And I kind of wanted to relate it back to what we're hearing from our actual customers here at Rubrik. So when we talk to our customers about modernization and whatnot, it can really be boiled down into 3 major imperatives that they're noticing as they proceed through this journey that they're on. So the first is automation, right? Our customers really want to better leverage modern software, which can in turn be automated in order to integrate in basically data management capabilities into their current strategies and workloads that they have. Secondly, we don't talk to a customer at all that doesn't in some way or another talk about cloud or their journey to the cloud. So whether they're just getting started to consume some sort of cloud service, maybe a SaaS service like Microsoft 365, or maybe they're deploying cloud native solutions, with multi-cloud strategies. Basically, doesn't matter what stage of that journey they're on, they want their data management solutions to support and scale with them along that journey. And then finally, the third point that we hear is they want to get more from their data, right? We have basically, as a backup company, this huge central repository of data, and we go to great lengths to protect our production data, and then we gather it all into the sort of this internal repository, and they really want to use that repository to help mitigate data risk and basically get more out of their data. They have regulations that they have to adhere to, and they want to make sure they're secured against things like ransomware and whatnot. So those three things, the biggest challenges that we're hearing from our customers is that their legacy data protection systems, some of which have been purchased nearly by decades ago, just aren't prepared for this future that they have in store. First, they're complex. They're very complex. Over the years, we've had some customers end up with hundreds, if not thousands, of these backup jobs that need to be maintained. Legacy solutions also suffer from slow and inconsistent recovery workflows, and they really don't leverage sort of modern advancements in technologies to provide things like instant recovery. And of course, legacy is expensive, right? There's capital that's required to maintain and upgrade hardware, not to mention the cost and expertise that's required to manage the plethora of backup jobs. And of course, we have, that cost of downtime, right? The cost of having your critical systems down and your organization missing recovery objectives, which is really, that's the hardest thing to put a price on. So with this all said, this is why with Rubrik, we've designed sort of our solution around these three imperatives to help customers break free from these legacy challenges with a more modern way. So at the core of our platform, as you can see in the middle here, lies modernization and automation. There's several unique components to support that. And I'm going to go into each of these in a lot more detail, but just to kind of summarize, the first is SLA automation. This is our policy-based engine, which really allows organizations to replace those thousands of backup jobs with just a few policies that could be applied across all their workloads. Secondly, we're built around recovery. We're able to quickly and globally search across your entire environment and then deliver, one-click instant recovery, allowing you to give your end users and application users, nearly instant access to their workloads if there's an outage. And then thirdly, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart, is, we have a true API first architecture, and this really provides the foundation for nearly endless use cases and integrations and the ability to deliver new and integrate into existing automation and orchestration workflows. So, and this covers off all of the Rubrik functionality. So if you could do it, within the UI, you can also accomplish this with an underlying API call. And that's how we see, integrations into things like Ansible and Terraform and whatnot. And then finally, Rubrik's built around security. And this really starts with our custom built file system. We call this Atlas, and it's an immutable file system. So what this means is that once data is written into the Rubrik platform, it can never be changed. So this provides the basis for a lot of the applications and things that we've released as of late to provide ransomware resilience and different things like that. So the second pillar of our platform involves leveraging cloud, right? And we really have three main plays as it deals with cloud. First, we make it super easy to utilize cloud storage as an archive. So this allows our customers to archive off older, mostly unused backups to lower cost storage tiers. Secondly, we can help with your cloud migration, right? As organizations are looking to migrate data to the cloud for the purpose of actually, turning that into a cloud native instance. And then finally, once your organization's in the cloud, we provide native protection for all of your cloud applications that you have running. So, and then lastly, on the top here is Rubrik's built around mitigating data risk. We actually won Best of VMworld for security which, is pretty weird for a backup company to win, but we actually won that. That was a couple of years ago. So the way we do this is, since we back up not just data, but we also generate a wealth of metadata around that, we're able to leverage these backups to get more than just data protection. And we've launched applications through our SaaS offering, Polaris, to do just this. So the first application focuses on cyber resiliency against ransomware. And then our second application that we've launched is a data governance play. So with that, I want to quickly dive into each one of these design centers and give you a little bit more detail. So we'll start with the topic of the day, which is modernization and automation. And one of the reasons behind Rubrik's market pull is that data protection over the last decade really hasn't changed much, right? It's still a complex architecture that's made up of a bunch of different hardware and software components, and often requires a lot of personnel time to keep it up and running. So we modernize this by collapsing all of these things, your tape, your storage, your cataloging servers, different things like that, into a single software fabric that basically scales out infinitely to provide data protection on-prem and in the cloud. We're also hearing, customers that they're not meeting recovery objectives with their legacy solution that often requires multiple steps to recover. So with Rubrik, you can quickly search across the entire environment and easily pick the restore point that you want. And from there, you can mount that Rubrik backup directly back to your host. So if it's a VMware environment, Rubrik actually becomes a data store in that point, and we can give nearly instant access. And then lastly, obviously it always comes down to cost. Legacy backups gotten costly. There's hardware upgrades, forklift upgrades, maintenance, and the cost of the personnel that we mentioned. Modern backups just less expensive, and our customers typically recover 70 to 90% of their operational or administrative time, and they save up to 40 to 50% in total hardware costs. So how this happens and how all this modernization happens, basically the core of our product is what we call Sla Automation. So with legacy systems, you typically have to take all of your business objectives and turn them into some sort of technical reality. You go and negotiate with application owners on specific VMs and apps that need protecting. You figure out when you're going to schedule the backups, which order, and then there's blackouts and exclusions, and then all of a sudden we have all of these different jobs that need to be created, and they have to be created separately for each workload type. So we've worked with some customers that actually have as many as 3,000 jobs that they're managing at any point in time. With Rubrik, what we do is we reduce those jobs down to just a handful of what we call SLA domains. And SLA domains basically implement four main constructs. So first we have our RPO, right? So how often do we want to take backups? And then we have our retention. So how long would you like to keep them? So this is done in a grandfather, father, son type scenario. So think maybe I want to take a backup every 4 hours. I'm going to keep that for a day. I want to take daily backups, keep that for, a week, and then weeklies for a month, and so on and so forth. So then we specify any archival policies. So as backups become a certain amount of days old, let's go ahead and migrate these off the Rubrik platform to a lower cost storage tier. So maybe after 30 days, we want to move these backups, maybe to Azure or to Glacier. And then after that, we can set up what's called replication. And replication is very similar to archival, except instead of moving backups off of the end of the chain, what this does is process the most recent backups from the beginning of the chain. So think, I want to replicate these 7 most recent backups to another Rubrik cluster that sits at another location. That way, if I completely lose, my primary site, I can simply restore this elsewhere. So we assign these SLAs basically across all of our on-premise applications and cloud. And as the environment scales, Rubrik takes all of the work that the backup admins typically had to do and basically goes ahead and begins to, just make sure that our workloads are adhering to this. And these SLAs, or this policy-based engine, is really the direct driver behind our customers recovering valuable time and resources. And this quote here is from the Mall of America, how they've increased their efficiency by 80%. But there's countless other organizations and case studies on our website that could show you similar benefits. So I mean, if you want to go check that out, definitely the SLA domain engine is sort of the core of our product, and we'll show you that in the demo as well when we get to it. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about restore, because ultimately, that's why we have these backups in place anyways. So with some legacy systems, restores can be super tedious, right? We have to go and we have to find the files that we want to recover. And then, under the hood, some of those legacy applications have to reassemble full backups and take incrementals and do merges and do a whole bunch of work before the actual restore can take place. Rubrik's really changed all this to just a few clicks, because we've radically simplified the workflow, basically, that lets you search for a backup, and then you just simply select, the point in time that you're looking for. And that's all powered by this global metadata index that lets you look across your entire sort of infrastructure quickly. So there's no more siloed searching or anything like that. And finally, when the time comes for the data to actually be restored, we don't even have to actually move data. Of course, we have the options where you can do a restore where it actually copies data from the Rubrik platform back to the original location. But what we've been able to do is take that point in time snapshot and mount that directly to the host. So you can go ahead and resume operations with this is what we call instant recovery in seconds. So we can essentially restore those applications as fast as it takes for that OS to actually boot up. And you could do this unlimited times. So when you start to think about how many times you need to make copies of different applications for things like test and dev, we can easily do this with Rubrik. When we look at security, that's our approach really to security solves one of the biggest problems out there today that we're seeing more and more of, and that's ransomware. So essentially security, it starts with end-to-end encryption. We have strong access controls. The immutability allows our backups to be safeguarded against being compromised by ransomware. And if you may have seen the news, last year where the city of Durham were hit pretty hard, but they were actually a Rubrik customer, and they were able to avoid, paying the ransom and able to quickly recover from that attack because of Rubrik. And then finally, as I said, my favorite, right? Everything Rubrik does is extensible through the Rubrik API, which means basically any behavior that we trigger from the UI can actually be scripted or automated or integrated into any number of different tools that you may already own. And we've done some of the hard work already for you, right? We've written integrations for, commonly used things like VRA and ServiceNow, as well as, orchestration frameworks like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack, you name it. And this stuff's all freely available, accessible, and very, very well documented on our GitHub repository. And if you head to build.rubrik.com, we actually have built an an online community around this. So definitely there's a lot to be said about the resources and different things we put behind our APIs and automation. Now, let's take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about Rubrik and cloud. So as I mentioned, our customers are all on some sort of journey to the cloud, and they're really looking at Rubrik to do three things. Number one, we're going to make it easier to archive lower cost long-term storage to the cloud, right? So a lot of organizations have these regulations in place that says thou shalt keep 5 years worth of data or 7 years worth of data. And to be honest, you're probably not going to ever restore any of this data that's super old. So why not take that off of the Rubrik platform? We'll migrate that up to AWS or Azure or GCP, and will allow you to basically pull that down, and that's on a file level. So when you do a restore from something that's been archived, we're not going to give you crazy egress costs from the cloud. We're just going to pull those blocks down to make up that file that you're looking for. Secondly, is cloud migration. We're going to help organizations orchestrate, moving existing applications. So as we archive off that data, we actually have another ability within the cloud, what we call Cloud On, which will allow you to take that data that's been archived and essentially convert that into like a native AWS EC2 instance. So you can actually take your archived data, convert that into an EC2 instance, and then all of a sudden you have access to all the cloud services and benefits that are running there. And then finally, there's ensuring that our cloud native applications are protected. So as you have these EC2 instances or your RDS instances or your Azure VMs or GCP VMs, all of this can be protected natively with Rubrik as well. So when we look at actually that cloud native protection, because this is an area where we're starting to see more and more customers take advantage of, you've probably seen that among all of these different cloud providers, there's no real standard shared responsibility model. So AWS and Azure and GCP, they each sort of have their own version of the shared responsibility model. Also, each cloud provider has their own backup tools as well. So you might be thinking, why wouldn't I just use them, right? AWS has a backup tool. Azure has a backup tool. But to be honest, when you dig into them, there's a surprising amount of manual work that needs to be done. And we've heard that native tools are also tough to scale, and recovery can often take dozens of different steps. And if you're like a lot of organizations that use more than one cloud, you're definitely going to be end up with multiple different tools to use. So with Rubrik here, we actually have you covered. So whether you're in AWS or Azure or Google, we provide native protection of those cloud apps and workloads. And this is using the same policies that you've built for your on-premises workloads. So you can replace the hundreds or thousands of policies across your various infrastructure with just 4 to 5 SLAs and apply these across all your cloud services. So there's no separate jobs just for EC2. There's no separate jobs just for RDS, right? You could use the same SLA policy that's protecting a database and also protect, maybe an Azure VM with that. Also, with Rubrik, we're going to save you the time and remove the burden of sort of error-prone manual restores. So once you choose that recovery option, Rubrik takes care of everything else in the back end. So we intelligently manage, all the data in the cloud to reduce costs as well in the cloud, right? Because we know how much it's going to cost to run certain compute in order to, index different things and whatnot. So it's really as simple as a single point and click that you can recover within minutes. So also, the other big thing is going to be sort of that, centrally management of all your hybrid and multi-cloud environments, right? So it's one management console. There's no need to, learn how to use the AWS backup functionality. There's no need to learn how to use the Azure backup functionality. You basically learn how to use Rubrik, and you can go ahead and apply that everywhere. So there's no tools to toggle in between, and it basically allows your administrators to ramp up, cloud productivity faster. I've seen, I should mention here too, I've seen examples of this with some customers that we have. I'm not sure if we can name them, but a very big customer who leverages and leans on AWS a lot, who acquired another company who, it was an Azure, basically a company that used Azure. And because they used Rubrik, they could easily go and protect that Azure environment without ever having to actually learn Azure or learn new tools. So they could easily protect that while they looked at migrating it over and different things like that. Next, with cloud, we also, I mentioned Microsoft 365. That's another big sort of driver for us, and another one that's ramping up really, really quickly. So we provide the ability to, get started really quickly, automatically discover, automatically protect, and quickly restore, Microsoft 365 data on demand. So we can unpack sort of how this works. Usually there's a little video playing there, but I don't see it right now, but that's okay. First, um, setup is basically minutes, right? So it's delivered as a service via our Polaris platform, which is a SaaS offering. So there's no infrastructure required. It basically takes 2 steps to get set up. You authorize Rubrik within your Microsoft 365 environment, and then you're set up in minutes. And you can use these, basically the policies that you have configured for your on-prem workloads or other cloud native workloads, or you can, go ahead and easily click or create new ones. You can search for a particular file or folder and restore that, back to the original or to a new location. So if an employee basically leaves the company, you can recover in bulk, transfer control over to their manager, different things like that. And what's kind of unique is the Rubrik backups, while it's a SaaS service, Polaris just acts as a control plane. So your data never actually leaves your control. So the Rubrik backups never leave your Azure cloud. So we utilize those native sort of snapshot functionality within Azure to back all of this stuff up. So as we move on sort of to that last tier, and then I promise we'll jump into the demo here. Let's talk a little bit about mitigating data risk. Because as I mentioned, we don't just back up the data, but also generate a wealth of metadata. So we understand sort of the where and the when and the how. And this is what really lets us get more out of your data. So one of those areas that's of getting more is really around mitigating data risk. And Polaris, supports a number of different security and governance solutions that could provide value beyond just backup and recovery. So that first area we're going to look at is ransomware mitigation. And here's some of the issues that we're seeing with ransomware. So when it comes to recovery, it turns out that your backup is basically no longer your last line of defense, right? A lot of people assume that their backup data is actually backed up, but as it turns out, with some solutions, your backup data is actually vulnerable to the cyber attack as well. So depending on how your system, stores its data, you want to make sure that it's stored in an immutable fashion. And then, moreover on that, one of the biggest problems with ransomware is it often takes hours, if not days, to figure out sort of what your blast radius was, or how many different files and different things were affected, right? And, recovery really becomes virtually impossible trying to figure out what point in time to recover from, finding the affected files, and being able to restore across your entire organization. So what Rubrik's done is we've sort of introduced a new way to help solve this ransomware problem. So this is an application called Radar, and it's again available from our SaaS solution. And what we could do is we could detect anomalies. So it uses AI, machine learning algorithms to discover, files that have been altered or deleted or, basically added because of ransomware. So if there's compression or different things like that in there, or encryption, sorry. And then we let you easily find them and restore them with one click. So recovery from ransomware really couldn't be easier. And with Rubrik's immutable storage, you're always assured that you have an unaffected copy of your data that you can restore from. The next area that we can do more with your data is in terms of data governance. So the issue here is often at times you have all of this data and you just don't really know what's in that data or where it is or who's looking at it. And you're subject to more and more different data privacy rules, and compliance is, quickly becoming a part of every single audit, right? And a lot of organizations really still haven't solved this data classification problem. And solutions out there to do it for us can be complex and take months and months to implement. So with Rubrik, that's when we introduced our second application, and this one's called Sonar. And what it can do is really discover sensitive, personally identifiable information that's subject to, a certain amount of different regulations. So things like PCI or HIPAA or whatever. So you can really create an inventory to, support all your current and future data privacy regulations. And you can even run custom policies. So we have a bunch of policies sitting around that like the standard PCI things and PII and HIPAA and whatnot, but you can create, your custom ones if you have certain employee numbers that shouldn't be somewhere. So it's a simple regex. And really what it does is analyzes these snapshots, and can alert you to, if it finds anything like that. So if you find, 20,000 exposed social security numbers sitting in a publicly accessible file share, right? This allows you to quickly identify that risk and alert you to that. So with that, I'm just going to jump into a demo. So that's kind of a product overview of everything sort of that Rubrik has. Today, we're going to take a look at CDM, and I'm just going to take a look at some of the core functionality that we talked about, like SLA domains and, line mount and different things like that. So I'll jump into the demo.
While you're getting oriented there, let me just remind everybody that I am watching in the Q&A panel. We've got already tons of great questions, probably more than we'll be able to get through, but keep asking those. I'm filtering through the really good ones, and Mike and I are going to take them as soon as he's done. And there is a $50 gift card up for grabs for the best question. All right, go ahead, Mike.
Perfect. Thanks, James. All right, so this is our Rubrik cluster. This is one we have in a lab here. We're experiencing some cloud issues right now with Cloud On. That's the ability to transfer to EC2 instances. That's why we have some failed instances here, but that's all right. I'll get that fixed up after the show. There's a lot of people in this lab messing around, so you never know what's going to happen. But essentially, this is sort of the main summary screen where we can see, what's going on, some performance stats, some information around dedupe, what's going on within our cluster in terms of healthiness, making sure that our nodes are all up, what we have left for capacity, things like that. Here we can see, quickly, we have some 67 virtual machines that this cluster knows about. So we can see 21 of them are protected, but more importantly, we can see 46 of them here don't have an SLA assigned to them all. So that might be information that might be beneficial to you right away. We could click here and say, oh, what am I not protecting in my environment that I probably should be. This is just vSphere VMs, but as we jump into here, you can see we also support a number of other hypervisors like Hyper-V and AHV. Your physical Windows and Linux. You're definitely your databases, as well as NAS shares is another one. And then we have something called managed volumes as well. And what managed volumes is it's kind of a catch-all for anything that's not listed in here, because it's kind of not beneficial for us to build native integration for every single protected object. So what a managed volume does is essentially allow you to mount a little bit of storage off the Rubrik platform, and then you can go ahead and dump. So if it's like MySQL backups, you can go ahead and dump MySQL backups in there. And what it does is it actually, takes a snapshot of that before and after. And that's how it still provides the immutability in terms of just sort of your catch-all. So let's jump into sort of our SLA domains here. And I'll go ahead and we'll walk through the process of creating one just so we can see. We need a test. We'll call it test, the famous test SLA domain, or test 1, 2, 3. We can enable what's called continuous data protection. So this is available for VMware VMs. And what this does is allow us to, get down to like minute level RPOs. So it's an actual VIB file that gets installed on the ESXi hosts, and it can it uses the vSphere APIs for I forget what it's called, IO something or other. Anyways, it intercepts sort of the IO traffic on the ESXi machine and sends that off to Rubrik, so we can get sub-minute level RPOs if you want to use CDP. So as we get into our snapshots here, like I said, we can take a snapshot every 4 hours. And in Rubrik terms, snapshots are basically just snapshots on the Rubrik platform. So they're backups in essence. So maybe we want to take a backup every 4 hours. We're going to keep that for a day. We'll take it every day. We'll keep that for 30, kind of so on and so forth. For those organizations which need to get really specific, maybe you want to do weekly or quarterly and specify, when your quarter actually begins and different things like that, you can enable sort of advanced level frequencies. And of course, we could provide windows if we want to restrict our backups to only occur during certain times of the day, or if we just want to restrict that first full backup, because Rubrik operates on an incremental forever state. So basically the first backup's a full, and from then on, it's just incremental backups. So it's just that first one, which is going to take a long time. So we can sort of limit, when we want that first full backup to occur. From there, the archiving, like I mentioned, it's pretty simple to enable, right? We just toggle it on here. We'll select our archiving location. So on this cluster, we've got, looks like we have AWS and GCP set up. So, maybe we want to go to S3. We can, go ahead and say, oh, I want this to go to Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. But basically, I'm just going to leave it to the default storage class. And then we go ahead and just drag this down. So say, after 5 days, you can start archiving everything else off to cloud. There's no need for me to keep it on the Rubrik appliance. That way I can free up that storage for more recent backups. And replication, again, just toggled on. We can select another cluster, another Rubrik cluster to replicate to. And again, it's just a matter of, let me replicate the most recent 2 snapshots over to this Rubrik cluster. That way, in the event this Rubrik cluster goes away that we're on now, we can go ahead and restore from cluster A, which is normally at another location. So that's SLAs in a nutshell. How they get assigned is, let's go to virtual machines here. And I could take, well, there's my manager's Windows VM. Let's play with that right now. We could simply just go and select, what virtual machines we want, click Manage Protection, and then basically assign them to an SLA domain. So you can see here, this is a virtual machine that we're assigning, and we have access to those SLA domains. If we go to, maybe a SQL Server database, we can do the same SLA domains are going to be available for our SQL Server databases as well. So there's no separate jobs or policies depending on the workload type. Everything can be protected with that same SLA. So let's jump into one here. I think it's, as you can see, we have our search functionality here, which is pretty quick. So I'm going to take this HR timesheet virtual machine here. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll drill into it. And I can see different things, like where it lives right now, what SLA domain it's on, when my oldest snapshot is, when my newest one is, different things like that, as well as all the recent events. So I can jump into, let's say, April 11th here. So I can see I have 2 backups of this virtual machine. I'll go ahead and select the little ellipsis icon here to kind of walk through what our options are. So we have mount. So this is basically our live mount functionality where Rubrik becomes a data store within the vSphere environment. We also have instant recover. That's the same thing as live mount, except what it's going to do is it's going to affect the original virtual machine. It's going to power it off and rename it and do a bunch of different things. Export, this is going to be the functionality where we actually move the data off of the Rubrik appliance back onto some sort of production storage. And then, recover files. Since this guy's also a member of an archival policy. We can actually launch this on cloud as well if we want to. And of course, for each individual snapshot, we could do things like place it on legal hold, right? So it can never be expired, or change the actual retention if we want to make sure that we keep it around longer, different things like that. As far as file level recovery goes, if I just search here for the most restored file ever, the host file, we can go down and we can see, oh, we have 10 copies of this. We don't have any here that are on cloud. If they were on cloud, there'd be a little cloud icon here stating that this snapshot's already been, archived off to cloud. So if we wanted to recover that host file, we can download it to our local machine, restore it back to its original location, as well as export it to a different location as well. Maybe you want to export that to a different virtual machine or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and not do anything for file level recovery, but let's take a look at live mount. So I'll go ahead and I'll take this virtual machine, and just to show you that nothing's going on here, let's go to the actual virtual machine. We can see it right here, the ZFG HR timesheet virtual machine. We'll head back over here, and I'm just going to say mount this virtual machine. As you can see here, it's going to say, well, where do you want to mount it to, right? There are some advanced settings if you want to play around with different things like the MAC addresses and different things like that. I'm just going to go ahead and select, what ESXi host we want to mount to, and click mount. And basically this is done, right? This virtual machine is essentially, the recovery process has started. And if we come over here, we can see it's already created that virtual machine for us in vCenter. It's actually powering it on. So as you can imagine, say there was an outage or some sort of corruption on that virtual machine, this is actually recovering for us. So that's booting up for us right now. If we actually take a look at the hardware, we can see this data store here is actually an NFS data store that's mounted from our Rubrik cluster. So that virtual machine is essentially recovered, right? We can go ahead and we can see that in here as well. If we go to live mounts, go to our vSphere VM, we can see that this is powered on. So we can give access to this essentially, already, at a time that's right for us, we can go ahead and storage vMotion that using VMware's functionality, or maybe we want to, we can migrate the data store from within Rubrik as well. Maybe your backup admins don't have access to VMware, they only have access to Rubrik or things like that. And of course, we can unmount this virtual machine, and what that'll do is go ahead and power it off and basically delete it from VMware. So all of a sudden, that's gone for us. So that's essentially, Rubrik in a nutshell. I'll jump back to the slides here. But, really, hopefully, the presentation and the demo has, shown you sort of how a modern architecture such as Rubrik's can really be beneficial to your data management needs. So migrating away from some of these legacy, traditional job-based approaches to a policy-based data protection system, leveraging automation both internally within the product and, integrating externally into your own workflows. Also leveraging cloud, and, how all of these things really provide a modern approach to, data protection. So with that, I want to invite everyone here to our user conference as well. It's coming up. So on May 18th, we're going to be kicking off our second, what we call Rubrik Forward conference. We're going to have some awesome keynotes. I believe we have like the Snowflake CEO speaking, and there's a few other special guest speakers. And we're going to cover off some major announcements around our upcoming summer release that we have. And of course, we'll have a number of awesome breakout sessions, which will go super deep into different aspects of Rubrik and just technology in general. So definitely mark your calendars for this one. And, with that, that's really all I got for slides and demo today. So let's I guess we'll start to take a look at some of the questions.
Yeah, let's do it. Like I said earlier, we have a lot here,
Awesome.
so we'll get started and just see how many we can get through. And of course, if you think of something else while we're going right now, feel free to pop it in. We'll see if we can get to it. So Mike, I guess the first question here is about implementing a data governance program, which is a very broad topic, probably outside of the scope here, but do you want to maybe just reiterate some of the product features you mentioned that can help people get a handle on data governance? Because there's some really quick wins in what you talked about earlier.
Yeah, yeah, there absolutely is, and it's a tough one, right? Because there's data governance solutions out there that just do data governance, and they do it really really well. Um, and to be honest, a lot of companies already have them, but a lot of organizations just don't really have anything in place right now, and it's kind of scary because of the way data is fragmented, right? So we have data on SaaS solutions like Microsoft. We have data in OneDrive. We have data sitting in virtual machines. We have data on NAS shares. We just have data everywhere. Uh, and it's tough for a data governance solution to be able to integrate into all of those. So that's why, Rubrik sort of took the approach of delivering it at the data protection level, because to be honest, all of this data is getting protected by us. We have this giant repository of data, and as anyone will attest to now, the most important thing an organization has is their data. So to protect that and to know sort of what is inside that data is super important. So um, honestly, our data governance solution it's a SaaS offering. So it's just a matter of signing up and saying, yes, I'd like this. Um, it runs within the cloud, but the actual data, your data doesn't go to the cloud. That would be a horrible, horrible thing, right? So it uses all the different software and stuff on prem and within, your your cloud solutions to process the data. Metadata gets sent to Polaris. Polaris reports on what's inside that, but the data itself never actually goes up to Polaris. So, we're in this unique position of we have all of this data. Why can't we help our customers with some of these challenges that they're having? Because nobody really has a full handle on where everything is, and we're always expanding on this as well. We're adding this first step here is just identifying, and we're beginning to add more and more to that, like who has access to this data and different things like that. So, and because it's a SaaS based solution, we can release these things very very quickly as well. So I think every couple weeks there's a new Polaris release that gets released with new services and different things like that. So I don't know if that helps.
It does, yeah. And I'm completely on board with your premise that when you're going to do something like try and discover what's in the data, it makes sense to start with where the data is sitting. Rubrik is in a unique position to at least get the ball rolling there as far as identifying important pieces of data and stuff like that. So on the same kind of line of thinking, Rubrik is not a data governance tool per se, but has some super handy data governance features that can help you get started. Rubrik is also not a security tool per se, but as you mentioned, you've well regarded for security features, and you can do some really interesting things with helping people with security. One of the attendees asked about specifically protecting against an insider threat. Now, one of the things that can happen that would be classified as an insider threat is maybe a disgruntled employee hauls off and just like deletes a bunch of data. I imagine that's a place that honestly is kind of a
Mm-hmm.
softball for Rubrik to kind of take care of. Can you speak a little bit just about maybe that example or other examples of where specifically recovering from other security events that are not necessarily ransomware, but maybe more of an insider threat sort of thing, where Rubrik could help?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, insider threats are funny things because I guess it depends who the insider, who that insider is. But definitely, if if it's someone that's just went and deleted a bunch of data, obviously we're going to go ahead and um, restore that data. We're going to be able to restore that data for you. Radar, while we promote ransomware, is really built around detecting anomalies within the data. So uh, if a whole bunch of data is deleted, even if it's not ransomware, Radar's still going to report on that fact. So it's still going to say, "Hey, this isn't normal. We don't usually, lose 60 gigabytes of data on this virtual machine between backups or things like that." So um, while its main use case is ransomware resilience, right, and it does have a lot of different ways to read ransomware signatures and encryption and things like that, it will just report on data change as well. Um, Now, if that insider is your backup administrator and he's the threat, so there's obviously more they can do if you think about it, right? They can go ahead and delete production data, and then they can go ahead and jump into Rubrik and, make sure that these snapshots of that production data are expired, right? So they have the rights to jump in there and actually delete um, data from snapshots within Rubrik as well. We do provide production or protection from that as well. So there's obviously that legal hold aspect, which we saw quickly, right? We can make sure that a snapshot doesn't get affected by expiries, and we also have worm SLAs as well. So we can enable that SLA domain, is going to write once, and it's not going to change, and it's going to prevent, even the backup administrator from going in there and expiring those snapshots. And we've actually went through this within our lab. So we enabled it when we first released the feature in our lab because I thought, oh, this is cool. I want to see if it works. And sure enough, we enabled it. We backed up a bunch of data, and then we could not delete it. So I said, well, how do I delete this? Because I actually wanted it deleted. And you actually you need to engage Rubrik support, and you need to provide ownership details around the cluster before support will even tackle it. So it took us a couple days even to get
Whoops.
it deleted, even though they knew who we were. So it was they take it very, very seriously. So we do protect against the insider threat that's not the backup admin, and then if the insider threat happens to be your backup admin, then we'll protect against that as well. But we all know backup admins don't do that crazy stuff. We love them all. So
Never. Never. I'm glad you mentioned that, though. There was actually a specific question separately. Can an administrator modify or delete backup files? And so you covered that. There are a couple related questions here. I'll try to wrap into one about the speed of recovery. As you mentioned, having backup data is good. What really matters is how quickly you can recover it. So the first question is, would you maybe reiterate the mechanism by which you're able to recover so quickly, and what people's expectations should be as far as recovery goes? And then maybe as an extension of that, there's a question specifically about when you tier off a backup to a cheaper, archive kind of storage like you showed. What is the recovery like once you've done that? Because obviously that'll change things. So first, recovery in general. Second, recovery once it's been tiered off to archive.
for sure, yep. So as far as recovery in general goes, yeah, we provide basically two, other than file level. If well, let's say we're covering a complete workload, there's really two main ways that can happen. So there's what we call live mount or instant recovery, and what happens there. Actually, let me start with export. That's sort of export is your traditional type recovery. So you go into Rubrik, you say, you know what, I want to recover this virtual machine to this point in time. And what happens is, the wizard pops up and you select the ESXi host you want to go to, you select what data store or what production storage you want to recover that to, and the process of, copying that data off of the Rubrik cluster back onto your production storage begins. So obviously, as that data is copying, you're still down while that happens, right? And that type of approach, everybody has that. because that's table stakes for backup, right? So the other sort of approach that we have that's available for virtual machines and databases and manage volumes as well is what's called live mount or instant recovery. And what happens there is we utilize whatever solutions we have from the object type that's being backed up. So in the case of VMware, what happens is we have connectivity into the vCenter. We have those credentials, obviously, to get in to back up everything up and snapshot it. We utilize that to create an NFS data store. That data store maps to the Rubrik cluster. And then within the Rubrik cluster, it assembles basically the point in time for that virtual machine, makes it look like a VMDK, and just basically allows you to power that virtual machine on. So essentially, it takes less than a second to map the data store, less than a second to sort of assemble that and make it look like a virtual machine. And all of a sudden, we're powering that virtual machine on. So the underlying storage is still on the Rubrik cluster. And it's a read-write virtual machine. So you can go ahead and you can run it on there. Obviously, we don't recommend using Rubrik as your primary storage, but I mean, you can go ahead and grant your users access almost immediately to that recovered virtual machine, and then you just storage vMotion that off to your production storage at a time when it feels right to you, or at a time when that production storage is available again. So the second part of the question, if that snapshot is archived, obviously there's some work we need to do beforehand. So if it's a complete restore, we're going to have to go ahead and we're going to have to pull down all the blocks from AWS or from Azure or from GCP to pull that down to the Rubrik cluster before we can begin that actual restore. If it's just a file level, since we have all the metadata around that, we'll go ahead and pull just the blocks down for that one single file and pull it out of the cloud, rather than have to, we're not going to pull down a 2 terabyte disk just so you can grab, a 1 gigabyte file or something like that. So there's a little more work to do if it's in the cloud. And then again, that changes even as depending on what type of storage you used in the cloud. So if it's Glacier Deep Archive, obviously there's going to be a longer wait time. And even from within Rubrik, if you did use Glacier Deep Archive, you can go ahead and select, hey, I want to pay for expedited recovery or something like that. So all of those cloud recovery options are available within Rubrik as well.
Great. Okay, we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Mike, we're entering the rapid fire round. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 more questions. Give me about a sentence or 2 answer, and then I have a gift card to give away. All right, here we go.
Sounds good.
Lots of people asking about, does it integrate with this or does it integrate with that? Is there a good place for them to go and look at if what they're asking about is a built-in integration?
Yep, definitely. Go to Rubrik.com, take a look. If these slides are available, there was a slide at the start with like all of the different little icons of everything. But, think about it's, your standard stuff, SQL, Oracle, all those different things like that. And then your standard hypervisors and things like that. And there's always new and exciting integrations coming out. So.
Yeah, so I flipped back one slide. There's a bunch of things across the bottom here. That's maybe a place to start. And then, of course, check out the website. And then,
Yep.
Of course, the answer is, you mentioned at the beginning, APIs available to do basically everything. So if it's not built in, you can probably still make it happen somehow. Next question. Of course,
Yep.
Lots of people want to know about pricing. Can you give me the elevator pitch on how it's licensed?
Sure. So it's licensed essentially per node per capacity, right? So you'll first buy like a 4 node Rubrik cluster, depending on how much capacity you think you need. The SEs will go through this crazy sizing exercise with you to let you know. So that's how sort of the on-premise stuff is licensed. There's all sorts of different packages to include, things like radar and sonar. And we do have subscription-based licensing as well for the on-premises appliances as well. So if you want to sort of line up with the SaaS offering and say, well, I want I'm going to pay you this much for 3 years, and then after 3 years, give me a hardware refresh, a software refresh, and things like that. We do have subscription-based licensing for everything as well.
Perfect. Last question. Is there a disaster recovery sort of extension to the functionality or preferred way of integrating with some other kind of disaster recovery?
Oh, that's a fun one. Yes, and I would say whoever asked that question should really sign up for Rubrik Forward, because there's some fun announcements around those realms coming up. So yeah, there
Aha, the
most
old I
definitely
can't say
is,
anything, but you should come to the
a
event.
way to orchestrate DR. And yeah. I mean, it's called app flows. We've announced it. But there's portions of it we haven't really shown or done things. But there definitely is an orchestrated DR where you're going to be able to, test and execute DR plans and scripts and different things like that. So come to Forward.
Great.
We're a
Okay.
month away.
Well, thanks everybody. Yes, sign up for sure. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm so glad you all joined us today. I hope this has been informative, and that we've answered your question. If we didn't get to it, I'm sorry. Lots more information available on the Rubrik website, and as well, the Rubrik team will get all of these questions and reach out if that seems fitting. So without further ado, the winner of today's $300 Amazon gift card is Marissa Moore from Texas. Marissa, the Actual Tech Media team will reach out to you via email to deliver that gift card. Mike, thank you so much for presenting today. This was a great chat, and I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did too.
Yeah, thank you, James.